where do we want to go, and what do we want to see in the future?
And I saw there's a community visioning session as well, right?
That's correct. That's going to be on June 10th. You're welcome to attend that if you'd like to hear the feedback from the overall community. We're going to have a special session just for Plan Commission and City Council the following Monday.
And I would assume that's a Zoom meeting?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
And one of the things you put in your email out today was that we would be able to see the report on what is, or their perception of it. Are we going to be able to see that prior to, a few hours? You said in advance. Is it going to be, a week in advance so we can take some time and peruse it, or just?
So I don't know that it'll be a week in advance, but it'll at least be a day or so in advance. Staff is reviewing the report right now. We want to give the consultant our red lines and let them get them incorporated first. And then once they have that new draft, we're going to send it out to everyone.
Dennis, aren't you on that board outside of this one?
Yes.
So I think you're probably more in tune with some of those than us.
It's going similar to the last one.
And far. All right, who we missing? I see Steve, I see Matt. We all present, ready to roll, Alexa? Tricia?
Sorry, we're dealing with some technical issues. Let me see if we have everyone.
We are live on our stream, so on my end, we're good. I am going to turn my camera off. Just remember, for those of you that don't have your cameras on, when you do speak, to turn your cameras on. Thanks.
Reminder. 10-4. Okay, we will call our planning commission to order. Alexa, can you please do a roll call of the commissioners?
Chairman Popiel,
Present.
Vice Chairman Amador,
Here.
Commissioner Kamak,
Here?
Commissioner Yost,
Present.
and Commissioner Van Dyke.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you for the commissioners for joining us here tonight. Also like to introduce members of staff present with us here tonight. Matt Hayter, Deputy City Attorney, Steve Timms, Planning Manager, Jenny Axmaker, Principal Planner, Andrew Baker, Planner, Dominic Martellini, Planner, Tricia Mason, Community Development Manager, Alexa Olam, Administrative Specialist. And then I'd also like to introduce we do have a couple of alternate board members that are listening in today, Mr. Steve Douglas and Garrett Bitloff are on the call with us as well. So thank you to all the members with us tonight. Now moving on to the minutes. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting from the commissioners?
So moved.
And I have a second.
I second.
Thank you. Alexa, can you call for a vote to approve our minutes?
Commissioner Van Dyke,
Approve.
Mhm.
Commissioner Yost,
Yes.
Commissioner Kamak,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Amador,
Yes.
and Chairman Popiel.
Yes, the motion is passed.
Just a note, Commissioner Van Dyke was not in attendance, so she would not be voting.
Ah, thank you. Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so the motion is passed with 4 yeses for approval of our minutes. Let's move on to our first case of the evening. Mr. Hayter, would you please introduce our first case?
Absolutely. Thank you. The first case this evening is Z-761-03-21. Carlson Associates is requesting the approval of the PUD zone document amendment for Buckwheat Crossing PUD Amendment Number 1 to update residential densities and adjust permitted land use areas for the property located at southeast corner of 120th Avenue and Buckley Road, currently zoned PUD Plan Unit Development District. And then presenting the case on the behalf of the city this evening, I believe, is Andrew Baker.
That's correct. Thanks, Matt. Good evening, planning commissioners. Will I be sharing my screen for the presentation, or Alexa, will you be pulling that up?
Andrew, you can share if you like.
Okay, great. Just give me one moment. Okay, can everybody see my presentation?
Yes.
Great. As Matt mentioned, this case is Z7761-03-21. This will be the first amendment to the Buckley Crossing Planned Unit Development Zone document. These properties are located on the southeast corner, of the 120th and Buckley Road. We're joined this evening by the applicant, Scott Carlson, with Carlson Associates. And as I mentioned, this is an amendment to an existing PUD zone document. The request takes up 4 properties. They are shown in the comprehensive plan as a mix of uses that generally reflects the allowed uses that were allowed in the original PUD. So on that southeast corner of 120th and Buckley, you can see a commercial area, as well as another one along 12th, mixed use in between High Plains Parkway and E470, as well as some residential areas towards the southwest and public area as well, where the 27J school district had a school and park site planned. This is part of the Buckley Crossing PUD. We have the Reunion residential PUD to the south, as well as the Contour commercial PUD to the north. We have some Adams County residential to the west, as well as the villages at Buffalo Run East PUD to the west. And then to the east is a Commerce City owned parcel that we have zoned as public, as well as some other Adams County residential properties. There's an aerial of the photo, or an aerial of the parcels, excuse me. You can see that on the north side, there is some existing single family residential, but the rest of the property is vacant. These properties were annexed in 1987. They were zoned under as the Third Creek Ranch PUD. That would be case files AN 8687 and Z 46887. That zoning was amended in 2003 under the name Buckley Crossing, which allowed a number of mixed uses, including commercial, residential, and public, as you had seen reflected in the comprehensive plan. Back in 2019, the applicants had submitted a sketch plat to begin discussing the site design, and a few issues came up during that process, which led us to think that a PUD amendment would be necessary. So they have requested this amendment to the PUD zone document to relocate and resize some of the different planning areas. One of those that became apparent was 27J, instead of wanting an elementary school site, in their plan realized that a middle school site was necessary. So instead of the original 25 acres planned in the Buckley Crossing PUD, they requested 35. Relocating that planning area across the High Plains Parkway was also desirable to the school and to the applicant. You will see in a couple of slides that we had a fairly exaggerated curve for the High Plains Parkway alignment. So realigning that and using some of those spaces a bit more efficiently, as well as modernizing some of the allowed uses that are going to be in those planning areas, and some of the bulk and development standards that you would see in those as well. So again, because of all of those changes, because staff and the applicant felt that a better development would result in just slightly updating this PUD that is almost 20 years old now, would be a benefit for everybody. So this PUD has been reformatted according to current Commerce City standards, as well as some of the densities that are allowed in our comprehensive plan, and then our templates and just generally cleaning up the actual formatting of the document. High Plains Park was realigned to utilize that land more efficiently, moving and expanding the school site. And the single family residential areas, we actually found that we could allow a little bit more density in certain areas where you saw those darker colors for the residential medium as opposed to residential low. We also created an additional commercial planning area in that little portion on 112th, also reflecting the land use plan. And then again, modifying the development standards to reflect current market trends. So this is the existing original PUD. You can see the exaggerated curvature of what was then called Buckley Road, now called High Plains Parkway. The school and park site being just southwest of that. And then a mixed use commercial business area kind of along the entire east side of that, with mixed use commercial business being on the corner of 120th and Buckley Road. All single family detached towards the south in a couple of kind of oddly shaped parcels, just due to the school site and that alignment of Buckley Road. This is the updated land use plan for Buckley Crossing. As you can see, we have new planning areas in the southwest. We've created this single family residential area, which reflects the comprehensive plan designation of residential low at a density of 1 to 4 dwelling units per acre. In place of the school site, and then along High Plains Parkway, we do allow the higher residential densities of 4 to 8 dwelling units per acre. So same land uses, just slightly denser along that High Plains Parkway. The creation of a new mixed use commercial business area along 112th, which is largely going to mirror what we see up here on 120th. And then everything east of High Plains Parkway is still going to be mixed use commercial residential. However, we do have the school and the public park sites that have been added to those, as well as some new commercial uses that are going to be allowed there. Another couple important things to note was we have the Buckley Road right-of-way, which is going to be vacated as that will be turned into High Plains Parkway and veer east. We have 100 feet of that, which is going to be vacated and turned into an open space pedestrian trail. We also have a 100-foot open space buffer along E470, where there is a plan for another multi-use path there. So we felt that it was important to show within the PUD document that there would be a strong pedestrian network, both connecting those two trails and open space areas together, and also connecting them to the public park and school via a pedestrian underpass crossing, which will take right here under High Plains Parkway. We also have some open channel drainage. It'll be regional drainage that'll be coming along up through the south here. And then some other pipe drainage that will be going along High Plains Parkway as well. So I'll go through each sheet, give you an idea of what the actual amendment has called for. The cover sheet is largely the same, other than updating some of the signature blocks and other Commerce City formatting standards that we have. Sheet number 2 shows the land use plan, which is basically what we just looked at. Those are going to be those 2 pages that we just saw. Sheet 3 goes into development standards. These standards have been updated to reflect the planning areas and the comprehensive plan. There are also street sections on that that were moved to the end of the document. Sheet 4, sheet 5, we have those development standards continued for each of those planning areas. And just since those had all been moved, you know, there's some slight deviations within each of those, and we can get into that. Sheet 6 shows allowed uses. Basically, we've updated those. Largely the single family residential area and the commercial area have stayed the same. It's really the mixed use area, which is going to allow more commercial uses, though not as many, and not the exact same kind as what we're going to allow on 112th. Those have been kind of picked through to, you know, not allow certain uses such as heavy auto-oriented uses and marijuana uses, for instance, just things that may not be appropriate right next to residential or a school site. Then we have 2 new sheets at the end of the document, sheet number 7, which is showing lot typicals, just giving an idea of some of the different types of housing product and lot types that are being proposed and how homes are actually going to fit on those. And then we have some alley standards on sheet 8. So I'll have this new land use plan showing up after each of these slides, just so as we go through them, you can kind of refresh your mind on the different planning areas and what we're talking about as we go through each of these. So planning areas A and B, which you'll notice are to the south of High Plains Parkway. This is going to be the residential area. And I'd like to go back to our comprehensive plan just really quick to give you an idea of what we're looking at. So as you can see, this southwest area is going to be residential low, while along High Plains Parkway, we have those designated as residential medium. So because some of the higher, more dense residential development that could take place within this mixed use area, since we're moving this school site over there, because of that loss of density, you know, basically we were okay with utilizing that space along High Plains Parkway as a higher density, and allowing smaller lots in order just for that give and take. So you will see that reflected in the new planning area B, which is still single family residential, but just is going to allow smaller lots. As far as allowed uses go, the only changes are going to include outdoor recreation, community gardens, daycare homes, and then antennas and bed and breakfast as conditional uses. But again, anything else is going to be single family residential, whether that's larger lot, smaller lot, or a single family attached. We have a front and rear loaded product that is conceptualized in there as well. And I also want to note that the larger lots that were allowed in the original PUD, those lot sizes went up to, I believe, up to 7,000 square feet. That's been slightly reduced as well. The largest lots that are going to be allowed in this in the amendment are 6,000 feet. So in a lot of ways, they're much larger lot development being replaced with some density, and then again that 100-foot pedestrian open space area that we've shown for the Buckley Crossing right of way that's getting vacated. Planning areas C and E, which are going to be the mixed use areas that are on the east side of High Plains Parkway. Those are shown as a mixed use area within the original Buckley Crossing PUD. However, they don't allow very many commercial uses. Really, they're just allowing more of a mix of residential uses that would have been found in the single family residential areas. So per the comp plan, we can allow several other commercial and public uses in there to make it a true mixed use zone, which along E470 and in between three of our arterial roadways is definitely desirable. So I will run through these. We can certainly go into more detail if you would like, but just for the record, the uses that have been added to this area as allowed will be pet daycare centers and veterinary offices, building materials and services, eating and drinking establishments, financial institutions, food and beverage sales, funeral homes, professional offices, personal services, private recreation or amusement facilities, furniture or appliance repair stores, retail establishments, auto washing and rental services, lodging establishments, office flex, auction houses, distilleries, breweries, and wineries, scientific research and design, mini storage and warehousing, and that's specifically without the allowance of outdoor storage, clubs and lodges, event centers, daycare facilities, golf courses, public lands, parks and buildings, educational facilities, and transportation facilities, and public utility offices as well. So again, those are going to be basically everything that is allowed east of High Plains Parkway. Next, we will discuss the commercial areas, which is going to be areas D and F along 120th and 112th Avenue, respectively. In the original PUD, there was an underlying zoning of the commercial and business zone districts, which were in place at the time. We've changed our zoning code that we don't have a business zone district anymore. However, you know, the commercial zone districts and commercial uses have largely stayed the same. It's going to be all those uses that I had just included, as well as some more intensive commercial uses. Like I had mentioned, more auto-oriented uses, as well as marijuana. We have also allowed the addition of multifamily, single-family attached uses, but only as allowed in a vertical mixed-use development. That's also per the comp plan. Again, in the other direction, that's making that commercial mixed-use zone a more true mixed use. We do want to see primarily commercial activity in those. However, we want to allow flexibility if there was a vertical mixed use product and a more of an urban form, that would be allowed. We also have senior housing, as I said, marijuana retail stores, medical centers, and primary caregivers that are going to be allowed in planning area D. And then the newly created planning area F is largely going to follow all those same allowed uses. So there's one look at the plan again. Getting into the development standards, as I had mentioned for planning area A in single family, we have reduced the allowance for 6,500 and 7,000 square foot lots to 6,000 square foot. This is only going to allow standard single lot, single family detached residential with the front loaded garage. The setbacks have been slightly amended as well. In planning area B, just outside of that, we will allow the same use with a reduced minimum lot size of 4,000 square feet. So this is going to be getting to that density that's closer to 4 to 8 dwelling units per acre. They've also introduced the small lot single family detached residential, as well as rear loaded, alley loaded garage products. Planning area C, which is going to be on the north side there. They have proposed single family attached townhome and multifamily residential development, and established development standards for each of those type of uses. We have also added those commercial and public uses, which we had discussed a few slides ago. Minimum floor areas for townhomes and apartments were also established. In planning area D, as I mentioned, those bulk standards really stayed the same as this was largely intended to be a commercial development. We have allowed multifamily residential as part of a vertical mixed use project. So we do have some standards added for those. The maximum building height of 150 feet has stayed the same from basically the highest building height that would have been allowed in the previous development as well. There was also a minimum lot size that was struck, as well as a minimum lot width that was reduced from 100 feet to 30 feet. Basically, understanding that a lot of newer commercial uses don't use large, big block, suburban type developments, allowing more of an urban commercial user to come in. So next we will move on to planning area E, right next to C, and that's going to be exactly the same as what we found in C. The same allowed uses of single family attached townhomes, multifamily, and non-residential uses. Those standards have also been established for those that wouldn't have been considered in the original PUD. And then lastly, planning area F, new for this amendment, following all the same standards that we had just discussed in planning area D up along 120th Avenue. All of the required notification per City of Commerce City Code has been met. A postcard was mailed to adjacent property owners. A publication was made in the Denver Post, and 4 signs were posted on the property. As of this date, staff has received no requests for additional information, no concerns or comments from the public from those notifications. The DRT recommends that Planning Commission vote to forward this request to City Council with a favorable recommendation based on the fact that the revised amendment both meets new Commerce City's codes and standards, and the comprehensive plan allows more flexibility and a more modernized development for a PUD who has been sitting vacant for almost 20 years. That wraps up my presentation. I am here available for questions, and we have the applicant and their team here as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Quick question for you. Any discussions with the school district since you're kind of flipping their side over closer to E470? Any concerns from their point of view?
No concerns from them. As I had mentioned, it was actually during that sketch plat process back in 2019, when we had referred that to the school district, that they had made the comment that they wished for a larger school site. And staff, the applicant, and the school district worked together and basically all came to the conclusion that it would be mutually beneficial for everybody to move that site over to the
Okay.
So that was really at their request.
Okay. Mr. Amador, question for Andrew?
In your conversation with the school district, did they think 30 was enough, or did they request 40? Because typically 40 is a pretty good standard.
So it seemed like 35 was their request. And I think that that's kind of just based on a matrix that they use, which is 25 acres minimum for an elementary school site, 35 acres minimum for a middle school site. And so, yeah, my assumption is that you know, they've actually gotten, they have some conceptual plans drawn up for that middle school kind of fitting in there. And so, yes, I believe that meets all of their needs.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Yost?
Andrew, I have 3 questions. So the intersection at 120th and Buckley, it's one of the sore spots that I drive frequently. Are there any plans with this new development to expand that intersection at 120th and Buckley?
I'm sure that there are improvements that are planned. I would need to confer with my colleagues in Public Works to get you more details about what that actually looks like. But you know, my assumption is with High Plains Parkway getting constructed, there would be improvements to all of those roads and that intersection, and that really once we started the platting process, we realized that the PUD itself and the land uses needed a little bit of work before we got into that. So if we can get approval through this PUD amendment, we would eventually be going through another sketch plat, final plat, and then development plan process, in which we would write a public improvements agreement and make sure that all of those standards, full right-of-way build outs, are included in that ultimate development.
Okay, but so the answer to my question is you don't know?
The answer to your question is yes. I just don't have exact details about what that's going to look like.
Okay, gotcha.
Commissioner Yost, if I could interject, 120th Avenue is designated a principal arterial with the city. And so it will be 6 lanes upon build out. The Public Works Department is currently in the process of designing 120th, basically
Okay.
from US 85 to E470. And so the design elements is the first phase. After they do that, then they would get money for construction. So it is in the works, yes.
Okay, got it. Got it.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay, second question. When we talk about mixed use commercial, I heard you say that townhomes. So if I were, is mixed use commercial going to include townhomes or apartments or condominiums?
All the above.
Okay, so it could be a grooming, a dog grooming place on one side of the street and then townhomes on the other. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. However, that would be in the areas C and E that you see. For areas D and F, it wouldn't necessarily be next to, but it would be more of like ground level commercial with residential units, condos, apartments on top of that as second, third floor of that development.
Understood. My third question, and I can't remember what it is. All right, thank you very much. I appreciate your answers to my questions.
Thank you, Mr.
Absolutely.
Yost. Mr. Kamick, did you have a question?
Yes, I did, and I resemble Commissioner Yost. When you get old enough, well, you can't remember your name. So if he thinks of it, why, butt in for sure. And he asked a question that kind of, one of the things that I was going to address. I presume when you talk about the mixed use, you're using the standard definition of commercial real estate, where mixed use is businesses on the ground floor and residential above it. Is that correct, Andrew?
That is correct when we talk about vertical mixed use. However, there is also horizontal mixed use as well. And so in areas C and E, theoretically, you could see one subdivision that has a commercial lot that is going to be specifically for a commercial use, and then residential lots that are right next door to it. So it doesn't necessarily have to be stacked on top of one another.
Yeah, you mentioned that there's been some changes in zoning codes, and not to get off topic, but I'm kind of curious, was the Avia build-to-rent project, is that in Commerce City or is that in Brighton, or
It's in
The Avia single family for rent development, I maybe want Steve to back me up here, but I believe that is in Commerce City, that they are proposing in the Settlers Crossing development. And so, yes, they may be planning one of those in Brighton as well, but I do believe that we have one of those that's I think still in the review process.
No, Avia is already up and running at 120th, and the reason that I asked that is because lot sizes in that are substantially smaller than what our typical lot sizes have been historically. And you mentioned that there's been some changes in zoning codes. Who changes zoning codes, and does that come through our Peruvids, or does the city council look at that, or does the building department decide what they want? How are zoning codes changed? And the reason that and by the way, I really support what you guys have put together on this. I think that heavier density is good for our community. But when you get into the setbacks, as an example, and the medium density definition, You know, that's different than what we've operated before. And I fully support this on this project, but is that going to be a standard, and who approves that moving forward for our community?
Absolutely.
I'll answer the, so the just in your house, right? That is in the city. That's actually from a zoning perspective, zoned multifamily, not single family. And so it's actually all one lot with multiple buildings on it.
Right.
So that's kind of how it's allowed. In terms of the process to update zoning in general, that's in the charter of the city, and planning commission, you all, and city council gets the ultimate say in that.
Yeah, and you know what they call VIA is now horizontal apartments, and it's a big deal. Phoenix and Florida specifically have done extremely well in that, and that really offers our community a venue for living that hasn't been there and isn't in most communities. You bring a nicer family in that doesn't necessarily want to rent, but they do want a single family house, and they have a higher income, and it's just it's a great process. So I certainly support any way that we can encourage that, and you know, reducing the lot sizes and setbacks, I think is a good change on this.
Thank you, Mr. McCamick. Any further questions from the commissioners for staff? Did we want to pull the applicant forward? Andrew, is it Scott presenting for the applicant?
Yeah.
I think I'm here now. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
I think I'm on, okay. Andrew did a great job presenting, so I'm going to try to keep my comments very short. So I represent the ownership group. We've owned the property for a little over 30 years. Shortly after we bought it, we kind of had a bunch of internal issues we've been working on for a few decades. We got those resolved a couple of years ago, and then started working with the staff to resubmit and get the property in a development stage. And as Andrew mentioned, we submitted a sketch plat. And in that sketch plat process, we really discovered a couple things, really very important. One is that Public Works didn't like the road alignment, and the school didn't like the school configuration or its size. And so we, with the staff, worked on a resubmittal to change the road alignment to meet the Public Works request. We met extensively with the school district and worked with them about location and sizing. And then in that same process, we updated the zoning. And so we're happy to present what we've given you tonight. We do have our team members standing by for questions, but they're not going to make any presentations. So there's Norris Design, Daniel Jennings there, Chris McGranahan with the traffic report, and Anna Sparks with the engineering company ILC. And with that, I'll wait for any questions you may have.
Thanks, Mr. Carlson. It's great to hear the cooperation that you've had and the outreach that you have with those other communities to help this plan move forward. So questions from commissioners for Mr. Carlson and his team? Okay, Mr. Yost.
Mr. Carlson, does E extend? I'm a little confused about the borders here. So does section E extend to the drainage port or all the way to this conceptual pedestrian trail?
I believe it goes all the way to the pedestrian trail.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it goes to the dashed line there.
Okay, and how? Gotcha.
If you look at the plan where it's on the board right now,
because the school district wanted to have some design flexibility in exactly how the school was laid out, that line may shift around a little bit. So rather than put a hard line boundary in, we put those 2 stars. And so what our intention is in the sketch plat process, we'll work with the school district in hard line, making the boundary of their school hard line then. But they didn't want to spend the money right now to determine something that's going to be in the future. So we committed in the PV that they're going to get 35 acres, and the exact hard boundary of that 35 acres is to be determined in the sketch plat.
Okay, gotcha. So the school district is gonna weigh in on how close these mixed-use commercial, this mixed-use commercial development is to the school.
That's correct.
Excellent. Thank you for answering my question.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Yost. Any further questions from the commissioners for the applicant?
I'd just like to congratulate the Carlson Group and all the people that you work with, Scott. I know your dad. You guys were great in helping us get started on the Landing Place Church, and I know you've done a tremendous amount of good things in our community here in Brighton and everywhere. So I think this is a great plan, and keep working with us. That's you've done a good job. We appreciate that big time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. We will now move over to our public comment portion of the meeting. Looks like we have 3 people registered to speak. The first one's Garrett Bitloff. Garrett, do you have any questions for the commission? Okay. Our next person, and I think, Steve, you have your hand raised, is Mr. Douglas. Mr. Douglas, any questions for me, for the commission?
Yes, I have a question for you to ask for the commission or even the applicant. Just to ask, make this clear on section proposed PUD section D, mixed use commercial business. Did the speaker mention that that could be medical marijuana usage or medical services?
I can go look at that real quick. Mr. Douglas, did you have any other questions? Then we can address all your questions. Or?
Yes. Well, I see the school, and then being that it's back, I know they're talking about, that's just conceptual with the stars, but it was better for the school to be on the other side because of all the traffic and everything, E470. But being there as far as extra space, if those two could swap, like the smaller star and have the school closest to the road, the park to the outside, would seem a much better concept. And then the trail there for E470, being on E470 for the last 8 years, they are very flexible about moving that trail. They more than likely would want to work with the developer and the school district to allow them as much space as needed. So just wanted to clarify that, but that's my question on the school. And then the last one is, will that house go away? Or, I mean, is that house already in the process of being sold and moved? On the corner of 120th and E470?
So, okay, thank you, Mr. Douglas. I think we can address a couple, and thank you for the note on the trail on E470. I think we can let the applicant know that one. That's a good one for them, coordination of it. As far as the mixed uses, Mr. Baker, I don't think you went through that list of it. I don't know if you want to pull up the list of what those allowable uses were. You're on mute, Mr. Baker. There you go.
Yes, absolutely. So in areas D and F, medical marijuana stores, as well as primary caregivers will be allowed. And then Hospitals and outpatient surgical centers will also be allowed as a conditional use. As far as the existing home goes, I do believe that that will be removed, but I don't know if that is in process quite yet or not.
That would probably be one for the applicant. I think he's probably, but I'm assuming since once the approval of this PUD would probably set a lot of those things in motion. So
right,
that's what I would assume on that side. And I'm assuming the medical marijuana, again, it would still follow underneath the same standards of it's got to be a certain location away from facilities and all that type of stuff. So
yeah, those will still meet all of the City of Commerce City regulations as far as placement of those facilities.
Okay. I do believe we had one additional person register as well, Joan Fritz. Do we know if?
See, that's not right.
Ms.
I
Fritz, do you
don't
have a
have any comments. I'm working with the Carlsons. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll now close our public portion of the meeting. I would like to acknowledge for the record that no e-comments were received for the case. Is there a motion from the case from the commissioners?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, based on the analysis above, the development review team believes, I'm sorry, let me go down to the right spot. Take two. I move that the Planning Commission enter a finding that the requested PUD zone document amendment for the property generally bound by East 64th Avenue on the north, Holly Street on the east, East 62nd Avenue on the south, and State Highway 2 and 85 on the west, contained in case Z.
I'm sorry, just to interrupt. I apologize, Mr. Knack. You're reading the second motion for the next case for the Greyhound Park.
Oh. Okay, I skipped something there. Sure enough.
Good catch, Steve.
If somebody else has it, go ahead.
Let's see, I move that the Planning Commission enter a finding that subject to certain conditions. Whoops. Take two. Never mind. Let's try this. I move that the Planning Commission enter a finding that the proposed PUD zone document amendment for the property located on the southwest corner of East 120th Avenue and Buckley Road, contained in case Z-761-03-21, meets the criteria of the Land Development Code, and based upon such findings, recommend that the City Council approve the PUD zone document amendment.
Second.
Is there a second? Discussion from the commissioners.
I just have one general comment. I will be voting for this, and I am glad to see that in the PUDs now that everything from my understanding that has been written in the Northern Range on PUD has restricted any allowable use of marijuana, which is a detriment, in my opinion, to the city from a revenue perspective, especially being located right off a DIA. I mean, there are a lot of people that I'm aware of that fly into Denver, and that's the first thing they want to get. So being the closest next to the airport would be very helpful from a generation. And I think the laws and policies that were designed when both myself and alternate Commissioner Douglas were on staff protect the community to the best of our ability. And I'm happy to see that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Amador. I agree. I think it's a good plan that they've presented here, and looking forward to seeing this moving. So I will be voting yes as well. Alexa, can we please call for a vote?
Any more discussion?
It's up to you, Mr. Yost. Do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, I'm all for it too. And it's gonna, as long as Buckley and 120th, not so much 120th, but the intersection at 120th and Buckley gets improved, I'm all for it. I think it's a great idea.
You have to understand, Commissioner, that the north site of that is in Brighton, I believe, and so it's, negotiation and working with Brighton as
Yeah,
well as doing what we want.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Dennis, that's the road most people take to Prairie Center.
Right.
Agree with that. Thank you all for the discussion. Alexa, can we please call for a vote?
Yes. Commissioner Van Dyke,
Yes.
Commissioner Yost,
Yes.
Commissioner Kamak,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Amador,
I
and Chairman Popiel.
Yes. The motion has passed. 5 yeses, 0 nos. Thank you. Good job on presenting the case, Mr. Baker, and thank you to the applicant. Mr. Hayter, can you please present the
Good
second
evening.
case of the evening?
Of course, I can do that. Second case tonight is Z-941-17-19-21. The Commerce City Urban Renewal Authority, the CCURA, is requesting approval of an amendment to the existing Mile High Greyhound Park PUD zone document to update the commercial and institutional uses on the western portion of the site, which are tracks A and B, for the property located between East 64th Avenue and East 62nd Avenue and between Howie Street and Highway 2, zoned PUD planned unit development. Ms. Jenny Oxmacher will be presenting the case on behalf of the city this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Hayter. Let me share my screen and we'll get started. So as mentioned, this is case Z941-17-19-21. This is an amendment to the Mile High Greyhound Park PUD located generally at 64th and Holly. So here's the site context. The site is zoned PUD. We have residential to the north of 64th Avenue, also residential to the south of 62nd. We have the King Soopers commercial area to the south. We have Highway 85 and Highway 2 to the west. And then we have additional residential to the east with commercial and then Central Elementary School in the northeast corner.
I can't see the screen.
I don't see anything on the screen. It just says Jenny Oxmacher started screen sharing,
Oh dear.
but it doesn't.
Let's see. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
Now we
Yes.
see it, yeah.
All right, well,
Thank
let's back up and take it from the top. Okay, so here's the site, zoned PUD. We have that commercial area to the north and to the south. To the south is the King Soopers shopping center. Then we have single family homes to the north, single family homes to the south, the commercial area to the east with Central Elementary School. And then we have to the west, Highway 85 and Highway 2. The future land use plan has this site designated for mixed use, commercial and corridor. And the comprehensive plan specifically talks about this property. It identifies the former Wembley site or Mile High Greyhound Park site for redevelopment as a mixed use project. And mixed use, just as Andrew mentioned earlier, is a mix of residential, retail, commercial, and office uses, either vertical or horizontally mixed, and is intended for urban environments. This site is also designated within the comprehensive plan as a regional commercial center, which includes a mix of uses with appropriate transitions, shared plazas and clustered buildings, visual interest, and is intended also for urban environments. So here's a fairly recent aerial of the site. You'll see we've got Parkway coming up from the south. This is 62nd and 64th. They're hard at work on the infrastructure within the property. And if you've driven by lately, there's a 4-story building that is coming out of the ground, which is exciting to see. So the case history for this site, the Greyhound Park racing ended in 2008. The Commerce City Urban Renewal Authority purchased the property in 2011. The former racetrack was demolished in 2013. This was originally rezoned from C3 to PUD in 2017, and the property was platted with a master infrastructure plat in 2020. So the request tonight is to amend the PUD to update the commercial and institutional uses on parcels A and B, that western portion of the site. This is in order to provide the flexibility to maximize the use of the land and provide the best design and layout possible. So there are 10 sheets in the original Mile High Greyhound Park PUD. We're only amending 2 of them this evening. So sheet 1 is being updated to have the same legal description, but new signature pages. And then sheet 6, which has the allowable uses, is also being updated. Sheet 2, which is the narrative, sheet 3, which is existing conditions, sheet 4 is visual depiction of planning areas, bulk standards, and then the cross sections will not change. So this layout shows you the planning areas within that approved PUD. The only planning areas that any changes will occur to with this first amendment is the institutional use parcel A and the commercial use parcel B. The rest of these parcels will not have any changes. And it's also important to point out the CCURA retained ownership of parcels A and parcels B. The rest of the site, the eastern portion, was sold to a master developer. All right, so this allows land uses for parcel A and parcel B to be expanded. So no changes to the residential area, as I mentioned. Parcel A will include additional, harmonious commercial uses. So for example, the possibility of a hotel use was added, conference or event space was added, standalone retail development, and vertical mixed use. And that's true vertical mixed use. Horizontal mixed use would not be allowed. Then in parcel B, we're also adding that component for vertical mixed use, vocational training centers, and that additional conference or event space as well. So amendment number 1 consists only of 2 sheets. It replaces that sheet 1 that I spoke about earlier with updated signature blocks, and then replaces sheet 6, the land use table, with sheet 2 of this amendment. It includes an updated land use table, and the changes are highlighted on that land use table. No other sheets are being altered. Those existing regulations will remain in effect as originally proposed. So there won't be any changes to bulk standards, parking standards, cross sections, open space requirements, and there'll be no alterations to the approved design standards as part of this. So here's the latest conceptual design for the build out of the entire Mile High Greyhound Park. So you can see Parkway extending to Glencoe, moving through the center of the site. There's a central park. There's multifamily market rate development on this western portion. We have approved a plat for 30 single family homes on this C1 to the north. We've approved a plat for 20 duplexes consisting of 40 units on this C2 to the north. There's parcel F, which has a townhome with above ground structured parking under review. We've approved 223 units of affordable multifamily on this parcel D3. There'll be future development on D3 in this area, and I believe it's additional development in C3 to be submitted. There's the regional detention bond on the far east side. So the CCURA, in looking at preparing parcels A and B for development, contacted HOK Design Group and had them go through kind of a scenario planning exercise to see, with the parking requirements associated with the site, kind of do a best fit analysis for the development of parcels A and B. So while the institutional use is still a critical component of this development, the conceptual design exercise showed that it might actually fit better on parcel B as opposed to parcel A. So this is the preferred concept that this design group came up with. Has the institutional use here, a hotel use, some shared parking in the middle, and then retail on the hard corner. Some additional retail on parcel A to the north, and then the potential for the future conference or event center up here as well. And then some entertainment retail across the street from the proposed multifamily development. So public notice required for this case was completed. Signs were posted, adjacent property owners were notified by postcard, and it was posted in the Sentinel. As of this date, staff has received no requests for additional information. And the proposed PUD zone document meets the approval criteria of section 21-3251 of the Land Development Code. And therefore, the DRT recommends the Planning Commission vote to forward this request to City Council with a favorable recommendation. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions. And the applicant is me as well.
Thank you, Jenny. Questions from the commissioners or staff?
I have a question for you, Jenny.
Yes, sir.
Do you have tenants or buyers for those places, people that have committed, in the development world, and certainly in the financing world, you don't want to start making changes until you know what its ultimate use is going to be. You don't build a shopping center until you have tenants, and you don't build an apartment house until you know that there's a need for housing in the community. Do you have tenants, or do you have uses online and in negotiation for these uses?
So our economic development department recently released an RFP for a hotel user for the property. So those tenants are being courted right now and actively working through potential for deals.
What happens if they don't get one?
So that was part of the reason to expand the flexibility in this PUD zone document amendment. It doesn't take away any of the approved uses. It just adds flexibility in where those uses can be located so that the CCRA can go after the best possible tenants for this project.
And I presume the institutional part is looking for a college. Is that correct?
It's some sort of educational component. I don't know that the precise use has been determined.
Have we had communications with the community colleges or the universities and, you know, the CCHE, you know, to put, you know, who's going to put money into Commerce City at this point?
It's my understanding that the city manager's office is having those discussions. Yes.
Frankly, I'm skeptical.
Commissioner Van Dyke, did you question for staff?
Yeah, that was my question as well. You mentioned vocational training centers. Is that what this conversation about a potential relationship with one of the community colleges is about, or does a vocational training center, I guess, what could that possibly entail? What does that look like?
So vocational institutional use could be an educational facility. It could be something like the vocational training that's been mentioned, which can take on a whole variety of different opportunities. It could be something from apprenticeships for the trade construction. It could be catering, culinary arts. It could be a wide variety of different uses. That hasn't been narrowed down to a specific one. And what this PUD amendment does is it allows for that use to be located not only on the parcel A where it was originally envisioned, but maybe on parcel B as well. But it doesn't change the use that's allowed.
So it just expands where that could be located.
Correct. It just adds that flexibility so that if the building was large enough that it needed to shift to the southern parcel, it could.
Thank you.
And that's probably a good plan, but you know, let's keep in mind that we've been looking for those uses for almost 10 years now and haven't been able to get anybody to sign on the dotted line. So I will support this change, but it may just be academic for a long time.
Okay.
Jenny.
Mr. Yost, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do have a question. Jenny, who owns the land from Eldon Street West for these two parcels?
So that property is still owned by the CCURA, the Urban Renewal Authority. Those parcels were not sold to the master developer with the residential portion further east.
Okay, gotcha. Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Do we want to, Jenny, do you want to pull the applicant forward?
So I'm actually playing the role of the applicant as well. So I'm happy to
Nice.
answer any additional questions, or I'm sure Steve would be happy to speak on behalf of the URA as well.
Dual hat. Any further questions then from that?
You know, I do have a question, Jenny. So what's been the activity to find tenants for this space over the last several years? You know, we were looking for these things, you know, for a long time before we sold the land to the master developer. And did they choose not to take this on, or did the city say, no, we want to do it? What's the history about that decision that the city kept part of it? And then, you know, what are we doing to make the Urban Renewal Authority successful? You know, and I'd like to point out that the urban renewal authorities in Colorado and around the country historically are struggling and have for decades and many years. And, you know, I just hate to see the city keep trying to do things that don't get accomplished.
So I believe, and I don't know if it's the purchase and sale agreement or the master development agreement, but there is some incentives for the residential master developer to meet with commercial uses and encourage them to locate on this site. So there is some sort of partnership moving forward. However, the city also has a very vested interest in this development. And so our economic development department has been leading the efforts in finding tenants for this location.
Mr. Yost, did you have another question?
You know what? No, I don't. My bad.
Thank you. There's no further questions for Jenny, or as we're playing her role as the applicant as well. We'll now move over to our public comment session. So first one on the list is Garrett. Is Garrett on the line? No, he didn't have one last time. Okay.
Doesn't look like Garrett's on the line at all, Chairman.
Okay, so I can mark him off the list. And then Mr. Douglas, I see you as our second registered attendee.
Thank you. This is a good discussion here. And myself as a former URA member, city council, and the thought process was institutional portion in the top left corner, section A, only because that fits closer to the neighborhood to the north. And then B, commercial, is right next to commercial to the south. And that just makes sense. You have more room for commercial, and that's a bigger attraction because that land is much bigger. So I could not see why the need to flip this, because then you have institutional coming in, you have commercial on one side, and then that puts either entertainment with outdoor events or so closer. I mean, you know, the noise level and the noise decibels to the residents in the north versus to the south, and you could have a good portion where people could walk from either commercial area from the south on section B versus A. And so you get a better play as a pitch in section B for economic development versus A. So I don't see why there should be a switch. It should be more of, there's more land use in section B for commercial for the URA and economic development. That would seem to be a bigger selling point than switching it from B to A. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. Douglas. I mean, I don't think there was a question there, but I think, and Jenny, correct me if I'm wrong, kind of like what you were stating earlier, the mission is not to limit the line, but to give more flexibility to it and allow different uses than what maybe was previously stated and committed to. So this will allow, once a formal agreement comes into place, that flexibility for whatever that might be. But that was just a recommendation for that from the firm, HOK.
So I'm just saying, you know, as alternate, and making these comments, I don't think that's a good move for the URA or to even propose this to the URA to make that switch. So, thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. Douglas. Okay. Also like to acknowledge for the record that no e-comments were received for the case. We will now close the public hearing portion of the case, and then we'll like to call for a motion from the commissioners.
Okay. Number C, try.
You had this one last time, Dennis.
I move, yeah, just see the above notes. I move that the Planning Commission enter a finding that the requested PUD zone document amendment for the property generally bound by East 64th Avenue on the north, Holly Street on the east, East 67th to 62nd Avenue on the south, and State Highway 2 and 85 on the west, contained in case Z 941, 17-19-21 meets the criteria of the Land Development Code, and based on such finding, recommend that the City Council approve the PUD zone document amendment.
I second.
How'd I do,
I have a
Steve?
I have a motion, I have a second. Is there any discussion from the commissioners?
Yeah, Chairman Popeil, I think this is a great idea. Anything like this, and I do share Commissioner Kamac's, you know, hesitancy to say, well, who's going to move in there? Or the question of who's good. But I think once they develop that entire area, I think businesses and I just think it's a standout for that community. And if we can make it bigger, I'm definitely for that.
I mean, I think it's great to see the development going on currently, as Jenny discussed, of what permits and what construction is going on there, what comes, and I think this will provide them the more flexibility for the EDC to hopefully find the right partner for that lot.
Yeah.
Mr. Amador, did you have a comment?
Just general comments about that corner, and I'm happy to see tract A and tract B of what's going on there. I just want to keep in mind that to the north side there's residential, but it's pretty far to the east. So if you think about it, there's a gas station there. There's I don't know if it's still a church. I believe it was a church, but it's more of a
church organization, right?
And whatnot. So I'm not too terribly concerned about the mix of uses on the west side of the site. I am happy to see the flexibility or more flexibility there. So for that reason, I will be voting for this, for the flexibility. And I'll just keep my comments about everything that happened to try to get this thing developed from prior to a Del West master developer and prior to that and prior to that. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Amador. All right, Alexa, would you please call for a vote?
Commissioner Van Dyke,
Yes.
Commissioner Yost,
Yes.
Commissioner Kamack,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Amador,
Yes.
and Chairman Popeil.
Yes,
Thank you.
the motion has passed, 5 yeses. Thank you, Jenny, for playing both hats tonight on the case. We will now move on to our third case of the evening. Matt, if you want to introduce that case.
Certainly. The final case this evening is CU-129-21. Public Service Company of Colorado is requesting approval of a conditional use permit, which allows for the replacement of approximately 1 mile of existing 10-inch high-pressure natural gas pipeline from the existing alignment corridor from Brighton Boulevard to approximately East 104th Avenue and Interstate 76, zoned right-of-way R1, which is single-family attached residential district, PUD, Planning and Development District, and I3, heavy intensity industrial district. Dominic Martinelli will be presenting the case this evening on behalf of the city.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hayter. I will be giving tonight's presentation on behalf of the city. The applicant, which is Public Service of Colorado and Excel, is also present tonight to provide remarks and additional comments as it pertains to this case. Want to confirm that everyone's able to see my screen?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. So as Mr. Hayter briefly mentioned, the pipeline extends approximately from Brighton Boulevard through Bell Creek to East 104th Avenue, and then parallels 104th Avenue to the approximate intersection of 104th Avenue and Interstate 76, slightly to the east of that. So the request tonight is for a conditional use permit for the replacement of an approximately 1 mile portion of existing natural gas pipeline. And I will get into those details a little bit here shortly. So you can see the dashed purple line shows the extent of the existing pipeline alignment that's proposed to be replaced as part of this project. So it starts from Brighton Boulevard to the east, goes through the Claybar Creek and Bell Creek residential neighborhoods, crosses under the Union Pacific Railroad until the point that it heads 104th Avenue, parallels 104th to I-76, and then there's a small portion directly next to Interstate 76 on the east. So this is one portion of an overall project that Excel is doing in regards to federal regulations from PHMSA. And so basically this portion is the alignment that goes through Commerce City boundaries. There is an additional west alignment that covers portions in adjacent Thornton. So the zoning map here shows that this property, the properties where this goes through is residential, PUD, industrial, and public right-of-way. And then the future land uses for this alignment are varying, but generally include medium residential, public park space, as well as general industrial areas and right-of-way for the permanence of the city's development. So the history and the purpose of this case, so this has been an existing 10-inch natural gas pipeline that's been in place since the early 1950s. There's been a rule that's been conducted by the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, PHMSA, which was a mega rule that was passed last year that required additional reporting requirements and testing for natural gas pipelines all across America. I'll let the applicant get into a little bit more detail on the specific reasons that this portion of the pipeline is being replaced based under the mega rule, but federal regulations do mandate the replacement of the portions of the pipeline that the Planning Commission is reviewing tonight. So all the development that's in the area developed around the existing pipeline corridor and alignment. There's been no history of leaks, accident, or spills to the city's knowledge as it pertains to this portion of the pipeline. And the applicant does not need to obtain additional right-of-way or easements for this pipeline, except for one small portion under the Union Pacific Railroad, which we'll cover in a little bit more detail later on. So the need for the conditional use permit within the Land Development Code in Article 5, the land use table specifies that public use utility installations and pipeline activities require a conditional use permit in any zone district. So to provide a little bit of update on the statistics, the approximate pipeline length in the city is 1 mile. The pipeline diameter is 10 inches. The approximate width of the construction. So the majority of the pipeline alignment is at least 30 feet of permanent easement on each side. There are a number of portions that exceed this, but the minimum is 30 feet. And then a pipeline cover depth is proposed to be 4 feet. And many of these conditions are still in place from the previous pipeline. So the construction schedule, the construction is planned to begin in summer 2021 following the approval of city land use applications, and then construction is expected to last 6 months. There are a number of regulatory agencies that are reviewing this application in addition to the city, which includes the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, PHMSA, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment from the Air Pollution Control Division, the Water Quality Control Division, the Hazardous Materials and Waste Management Division, the Colorado Department of Transportation, as well as the city. There were a number of external agencies that were reviewed on this case, which includes United Power, Excel, Tri-County Health Department, CDOT, and then South Adams County Fire Protection District. There were no significant concerns that were raised in the review of this application. So just an overview of the additional required permits that this pipeline will need to obtain prior to construction. Through CDPHE, they need to obtain a general construction stormwater permit, a construction dewatering permit, a hydrostatic testing permit, and then with CDOT, they need to get special use permit applications for installation within right-of-way. And then with the city, in addition to the conditional use permit, there are a number of portions of the pipeline alignment that do cross within the Commerce City's floodplain. They will need to obtain right-of-way permits wherever the pipeline crosses city right-of-way, which is multiple points along the route, as well as grading permits for any of the disturbance that occurs in the replacement of the pipeline. So just an overview of this, you can see where the pipeline alignment crosses through the floodplain. This is generally within Bell Creek in the portion of the park area, and the drainage flows through there. There are some additional portions east of US 85 where it does cross the floodplain. The applicant has applied for this application, but has not yet been approved. So proximity to residential, we'll cover this in a little bit more depth. As we mentioned, there's a 30-foot easement width minimum throughout the project with 15 feet on each side. And then there's at least 40 feet from property boundary to pipeline center line in Bell Creek. And then there is one portion within the existing Claybar Creek neighborhood where there's 30 feet from the center line of the pipeline to the edge of the home. And then you can kind of see here the alignment as it crosses through Bell Creek. And just keep in mind, this is already an existing pipeline that is in place. And then the portion here shows the alignment as it crosses through the Claybar Creek residential subdivision. This residential subdivision was platted in 2003 and accounted for, I believe that's at least a 30-foot easement on each side. You can kind of see generally as it crosses through these homes right at the corner of Barclay Court. There is a sufficient easement that's in place for that. So in the development review team's analysis of this case, the development review team and city staff considered the characteristics of the site, that the use will be served by the city. The proposed use would not result in substantial adverse effects, and adverse effects have been mitigated to the maximum extent feasible. There's provisions for ongoing maintenance. The use does not violate federal, state, or local requirements. There is a need for the existing community. There's a community need for the proposed application. There's a number of proposed changes that improve level of service, reduce energy use and carbon footprint, and provide service for existing and future development. So there was a public virtual neighborhood meeting that was held on April 15th. This was held remote due to the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. There were 12 members of the public in attendance that night. There was a website with information that Xcel has maintained throughout this project, which can be found at the link myxcelenergy.com. And then there was no additional request for information since this neighborhood meeting was held. For required public notification, there was a notification radius of 500 feet from the pipeline alignment, which ultimately ended up being 283 adjacent property owners notified, including the adjacent Bell Creek charter school and a number of other residential uses. There were 8 signs posted at each intersection where the pipeline crossed, and there was a publication placed within the Commerce City Sentinel Express. And then there are a number of conditions that generally deal with the approval of permits, obtaining easements and property rights, the requirement to obtain a floodplain permit, mitigation of construction disturbance activity, noise, dust, hazardous materials, and odor, and notification of changes to the city. And then the development review team's recommendation is that Planning Commission make a favorable recommendation of this request, subject to the conditions that were included within the staff report tonight. So staff is available to answer any questions, and the applicant is also present to speak on behalf of PSCO and Xcel.
Thank you, Dominic. Dominic, did you get any specifics of means and methods of kind of this replacement, whether they're boring it versus open trenching it, you know, to minimize the impact?
So staff's understanding based on the application is it's going to be a combination of both during specific portions of the construction period. And when we do bring the applicant in, I'll let them speak a little bit more as to what parts will be boring versus open trench on the alignment.
Okay. Mr. Amador?
For the staff, on the recommended motion under condition A, it says that the permit holder will comply with development plans dated 6/30/2021, but that hasn't come in yet, or am I confused?
So it should be included within the packet materials as the development plans. I'll go ahead and double check and ensure that that was included within the packet materials tonight.
Well, I'm just questioning the date because the plans dated 6/30/2021. It's only 6/1/2021. So if they're in there, it's exhibit B, but there's 314 pages.
So I'll double check that and ensure that that's the right document, but that should be a smaller portion. It shouldn't be 314 pages of development plans.
Oh, no, in our packet, it's 314, but I just want to make sure the date is right on the plans. That's all. Thanks.
Yeah, we'll double check the date and give you all the updated date of those plans for the condition. Thank you.
Designers like to look ahead, Mr. Amador, so. Okay, next up is Mr. Yost.
I'm a little confused. So am I to understand that there's a 30-foot easement, 15 feet on either side of this pipeline that runs through no residential property?
So the pipeline does run through residential properties, but there are an easement on any residential properties that it crosses. So that specific instance only occurs within the Claybar Creek subdivision. Within Bell Creek, the pipeline alignment is placed within a separate tract. So all the easements, there's no new easements that are being obtained except for the portion where it crosses under Union Pacific Railroad. But there are portions and residential lots within Claybar Creek where there is an easement in place for this alignment.
I'm questioning why we wouldn't run it. And I don't know what this is. It might be a floodplain or a green belt, but there's an area just to the northeast of it that has no residential properties. It curves around Bell Creek and Barclay. And I'm just wondering why we wouldn't put the pipeline through that area instead of going through a residential area.
Most of these are existing easements. Right, Dominic?
So, yes, and to clarify, yes, because of the federal regulation and the necessity and the need to replace this existing pipeline portion, I'll let the applicant talk a little bit more in depth about their consideration of alignments, but the difficulty in attaining additional easement and the sort of the federal regulation and preemption on this would most likely limit the city's ability to regulate a different alignment route for this project.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Van Dyke?
I think I'll wait until the applicant has an opportunity to speak. It might be addressed by the applicant.
Dominic, can we pull the applicant forward? I think that is.
We can promote Stephanie and the other folks with Tetra Check and Excel.
I see Randy has his.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. This is Randy Blank, and I'm the project manager with Xcel Energy. And I'll just kind of go through a few of the questions that you all have had so far. First of all, we appreciate your time. This is a pipeline that was actually installed in 1950 originally, and so there was no development around it at that time. And the majority of the easements that we obtained at that point in time was three rods, which is equivalent to 49.5 feet wide. So in general, our pipeline has a little more than than 15 feet from the edge of easements. Those easements actually predate any new development that has come in since that time. And so that is the alignment that we need to use. The reason that we're replacing this section, and Dominic alluded to it, it is a rule from PHMSA, which is the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, part of the U.S. Department of Transportation. And that just came into effect in 2019. I think we have 10 years total to remedy situations like this, but what their main focus is for safety. Prior to 1970, there really weren't any guidelines for pipelines such as this, and although we have had no safety incidences, we have great maintenance of this existing pipeline. We are mandated by the US government to replace it. And so, obviously we will install the new pipeline to today's standards, which are very stringent. We test the pipeline to 1.5 times the pressure that it would ever see with natural gas. Every weld is x-rayed to ensure, structural integrity. And the pipeline, once we put it into service, is under cathodic protection. So that basically eliminates any type of corrosion of the steel itself. And so it's a very safe pipeline. The existing pipeline is also, but due to the mandates from the US government, we're required to replace it. And the alignment that it's in is really the best alignment that we have. We already have existing easements. We're not encumbering anything else, anything new. As far as any kind of public reaction or any kind of public input that we've had, we had, like Dominic said, we had 12 people join a public meeting, and I don't remember exactly the number that were sent the postcards, but it was into the hundreds, a couple, at least 200 or 300, I think. And we explained the project to them during that meeting, and we only had one person actually ask a question. And that question was just, where would your contractor start, which end of the project? And so it wasn't anything really very, negative to the project. So I think we're in good shape with the public. As far as the question about how it will be installed, it is a combination of horizontal directional drilling or boring and open cutting. There will be, in this section, 3 horizontal directional drills, one through that Claybark Creek subdivision. So we shouldn't impact the backyards of those 2 folks. And also we will be 8 horizontal directional drilling underneath US 85, as well as the Union Pacific Railroad, all in one shot. And the third one is the far east end. It's just on the west side of I-76, and it'll run parallel to 104th Avenue to get under Havana Street. And so the rest of it will be open cut, but it's in easement, and it's not really encumbering any, paralleling any roads. We will be crossing a couple of roads, but we will be able to minimize traffic impacts to either 0 or possibly 1 day at the most on those. And so that's kind of just the general idea of what we need to do. It's only 1 mile within Commerce City. The reason that we're doing this section and not further west under the Platte River and that type of thing is because, as according to the PHMSA rule, it's dependent on population growth around the pipeline. And so with everything to the in the section in between the 2 sections, the one in Thornton and the one in Commerce City, that's all in floodplain. It's non-developable land, and so that's why we're not replacing that. We're not required to. We don't have, like I said, we don't have any safety issues with the existing pipeline, but we are required to because of the population growth around the existing pipeline where we are replacing it. So any other questions that you may have?
Mr. Blank, what is the material of the existing pipeline?
The material it's 10-inch steel, and it's got a fusion bond epoxy coating where it's direct buried. We also have additional coating abrasion resistant coating for the portions that are being bored.
And what are you replacing it with?
That's what we're
Okay.
replacing it with.
You're staying
The
with steel.
existing pipeline probably has some sort of tar coating on it.
But you believe it's a steel pipeline? The existing?
Oh, it is definitely a steel pipeline, the existing, yeah.
Any thoughts? I mean, this is quite the work that you're going through of increasing the size to make sure that you
No,
can meet.
we're not increasing the size. We have plenty of capacity in this area. We have done many studies.
Okay.
So there's no reason to.
Questions from the commissioner for the applicant? Okay.
Mr. Blank,
Yes,
can you define for me what tunneling, how do you define for me or give me an explanation of what you mean when you say tunneling?
horizontal directional drilling.
Yes, sir.
What they do is you set a bore machine on one end of a section that you're gonna bore.
Right.
You drill a pilot hole, and generally those are, you go in at an angle of 10 to 15 degrees basically to the surface. And so once you go down at that angle until you get to a point where generally you get into bedrock, and that's 25, 30 feet deep in this area.
Okay.
And then they'll basically straighten out and go horizontal until they need to come back up on the other end.
Gotcha.
And so they'll drill and most of these are 1,000 feet or more. But they'll drill the pilot hole, and then they generally back ream to make the hole larger before they pull the pipe in. But the pipe is actually strung out and welded above ground on the other end from where the bore machine is located.
Right.
And then once the hole is prepared, once that tunnel is prepared properly, they actually just pull in the pipe into there, all the way back to the bore machine.
And that's your plan for this section? It wasn't Bellet Creek. I'm sorry, I forgot what.
Clay Bar Creek, I think.
Yeah, is that your plan? for
The
Clay
Far
Bar?
East, yes, we are planning to bore that.
Excellent. I have no further questions.
Assuming there's no further questions from the commissioners for the applicant. We'll now move over to our public comment portion of the meeting. We have 2 people registered. I believe Garrett is still not online. And Mr. Douglas. Mr. Douglas, did you have any comments tonight on this case?
Thank you. I do like the fact that they're replacing an old pipeline. That's great because with the new one, the new standards. My question with the topographical changes, will there be any topographical changes that would permit anybody, if there's any change in the soil or anything, to be in a new floodplain area based on this placement of the pipe? Is one question. And the other question is there also going to be a future need to connect the eastern section with the western section if need to be? Because I see there's a gap there. I'm not sure if they're connected on one end or they're just concentrating on the Commerce City and not showing that connects to the west segment.
Okay, so first question, I mean, Dominic, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming the topography, the existing, anything that's disturbed for the eastern ground should be replaced, as it was previously disturbed. Is that correct?
Yes, that's my understanding of the application. So the portions where they do need to obtain a flood permit, the way that our floodplain ordinance works is any disturbance within the floodplain, even if you're not changing the grade, if it's under the base flood elevation, a floodplain permit is required. So it's sort of independent of whether or not they're increasing or anything like that. They're not pursuing a LOMR or a CLOMR for this. It's basically the grade that it's at. They're going to go in and they're going to put it 4 feet below grade. and then replace the existing pipeline. So I don't know if that's necessarily going to be a situation that occurs here. And just to clarify, the two portions that were shown in the map, they are connected. So obviously the pipeline goes from that portion of Thornton and then crosses through and connects into Commerce City. They're just not replacing that portion of the pipeline. And if you'd like, we can pull the applicant back in to discuss what decision-making went into the need or not need to replace that portion, and whether or not there would be any sort of future improvement on that portion that crosses under the floodplain.
Yeah, I think Mr. Blank, maybe if you could talk just about the limits of, and why is it stopped there? Is that a newer
Yeah.
portion? Is that?
Yes, I think I had kind of mentioned that before. The portion that's in the South Platte River floodplain that is not developable, there is the existing gas line that is the same line as what we're replacing. But that section is not under the rule to replace according to PHMSA. And so, you know, I suppose at some point down the line, if we start having maintenance issues with that, we may need to do some replacement of that, but there are no plans for that at this point. But yeah, they are connected, like Dominic was mentioning.
Thank you, Mr. Blank. I would also like to acknowledge for the record that no e-comments were received for the case. We will now close the public hearing portion of the case, and I will ask for a motion from the commissioners.
Before we do enter a motion, I do want to note that we did review and go back at the exhibit for the development plan. The date of the updated plans is March 9th, 2021. So when you make your motion, just reflect the date of March 9th, 2021 for the development plans.
Thank you for checking that, Dominic. Does somebody want to give it a go?
Sure, I'll take it. I move that the Planning Commission enter a finding that, subject to conditions, the requested conditional use permit and associated development plan for the project alignment contained in case CU-129-21 meets the criteria of the Land Development Code, and based on such finding, recommend that the Planning Commission move forward the request to the City Council with a recommendation of approval, subject to the following conditions and advisories. A, conditions. A, permit holder will comply with its development plans dated 6/30/21, including as exhibit B, to be consistent with the city code and conditions of approval. B, alterations to the route of this pipeline outside of the approved easements or any modification requiring raising the pipeline or its components above grade, especially as currently approved, will require an amendment to this conditional use permit. C, the applicant shall be required to obtain a floodplain permit prior to commencing construction of portions of the pipeline. Constructions that lie within Zone A, consistent with Land Development Code, Section 21-44403B. D, the permit holder shall repair any open space, trail, road, and right-of-way area that may be damaged during construction or maintenance. E, the permit holder shall notify all property owners by mail within 500 feet of the pipeline 7 days prior to the beginning construction within the Commerce City boundaries. F, Sorry, I had to scroll down. F, the permit holder shall restore any land disturbed as soon as possible. Revegetation will be conducted as soon as possible. G, the applicant will maintain the premise to be free of garbage, trash, and excessive debris at all times. H, watering of dirt, access roads, stockpile, and other distributed areas shall occur regularly during construction for the purpose of dust suppression. I, the operation shall comply with all applicable rules and regulations of the state and federal agencies and the Commerce City Municipal Code and Land Development Code. J, the permit holder shall to meet directly with the applicant school districts and coordinate the timing of construction to occur during a time when school is not in session to the extent practical. At the conclusion of the construction of the pipeline, the permit holder shall provide copies of as-built surveys, drawings, geotechnical data, and materials testing results to the city's planning division. L, the permit holder shall notify the Commerce City Planning Division if and when any permanent discontinuation of the use of this pipeline takes place. The permit holder shall be required to furnish a mitigation plan for the pipeline at that time.
Keep going.
Advisories, I'm getting there. Let me scroll down. Advisories. A license agreement with the city shall be required prior to construction on any property within Commerce City right of way. This project is subject to Chapter 22 of the Commerce City Revised Municipal Code.
I
Is there a
believe,
second?
I believe that was Mr. Yost's first
That was my
motion,
first.
and he did a yeoman's job, so I would be proud to second that.
I have a motion, I have a second. Is there discussion amongst the commissioners?
The only thing I would say is that we did use the original date in the first condition, and I think that we got an updated date from Mr. Martinelli.
Yes. Do we need
That's on
to,
the record. That's on the record.
Mr. Timms, do we need to reread that with the correct?
No, I don't think we need to reread it, just acknowledgement that, yes,
You guys make me reread that, I'm gonna kill you.
Okay. We have acknowledged. We have a motion. We have a second. No further discussion from the commissioners. Can we call for a vote?
Commissioner Van Dyke,
Yes.
Commissioner Yost,
Yes.
Commissioner Kamak,
Yes,
Vice Chairman Amador,
Yes.
and Chairman Popiel.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alexa. The motion has passed. 5 yeses in favor of the motion. Thank you again, Dominic. Thank you to the applicant. It was might receive a record for the longest motion. Okay, that concludes our cases for the evening, so we can move over to some miscellaneous information. So commission business, Mr. Timms, any commission business that we need to discuss tonight?
Just an update. I know that last month there were a question about, potentially returning to the building and things like that. So council did vote, I believe, in the past week or two about instituting study sessions and then regular meetings back in person. And so that will start. I think study sessions will be in July and regular meetings will be in August. So we'll look at, and there'll be some hybrid combination, right, with virtual and in person as well. But we'll look at that for late summer for Planning Commission. So August, September, around that time period. So we'll keep you posted as we move forward, but that's kind of the latest on that.
Okay. How are you thinking for next month's cases? Are we thinking we're having a meeting, or what is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you know, next is follows the day after or near the July 4th holiday, right? So we are looking. We don't know yet if we have anything, but we're sensitive to the schedule in close proximity to July 4th. So we'll keep you posted.
Steve, are we going to do the tour again this year or no?
Yeah, we'll probably later this fall, as now that the emergency regulations are being lifted. So I think there's ability to do those safely, and we'll see what options we have. But yeah.
Okay, good.
Thanks, Steve. Matt, any legal business we need to cover?
Nothing for you this evening, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hayter. Any other businesses from the commissioners? Thank you all. Our meeting is adjourned. Thanks all. Have a good night.